Yes, it is. Good afternoon. I know it's getting late and people are getting tired, as obviously one can see in the room, but thanks a million for joining us for what I think will be a really interesting discussions we're going to have now about the music industry, right? And I could imagine that many of you think, well, we have blockchain and now music, and isn't that a bit artificial to bring it together? And the honest answer is, I think not. Right. When you look at the music industry, how many of you have ever thought about how it started? That's a question, right? Very few have, right? In reality, it was always driven by technology. And when you look at the growth of how it happened, I think it started with light, and then there was producers coming in who were basically copywriting the musical work of others and bringing that out to people who could then perform it at home at their places and so forth. Then the next big thing was the microphone, right? Which again increased the audience of people you could talk to and sing to or play your music to. And then technology started to happen with shellacs and with vinyls and with cassettes and with ultimately digital, right? And when we think digital, I think we have to think about players like Spotify and Deezer and Apple iTunes and Amazon and so forth. But the reality is what has happened in the background of all of that. Are musical artists getting more of the money? Are they getting it faster or not? And especially when you look at some of the big streaming platforms, you actually realize that right now they're getting less. So there's people out there who did investigations and they thought it was like 0.4% of what they're making of their average income they need to survive. So that is the kind of questions we'll be discussing today with an amazing panel. First of all, I have to say a big thank you to the CEO of Zenota who asked me to do the panel today, and who also reminded me that Zenota is very much about diversity, right? Which you don't see here right now, which is not what was planned, right? So originally we had also amazing women on the panel, but unfortunately for technical problems and one sickness, we couldn't do that. So don't take that as given. That is not what Zenota is all about. But nevertheless, I think the panel is amazing, and I will ask them in a minute to introduce themselves. So my name is Günther. I'm a partner with a Big Four company where I'm leading legal for Switzerland, and I'm on the other hand running a small investment firm with two friends, which is focusing on circularity and indeed blockchain and other instrumental technologies we're bringing to the to the panel, I guess. And the real reason, I guess, I have been invited to do that is I'm a failed rock star, right? I really tried to do the music out there, and we were quite successful back in the day, but it never played out, obviously, here. Maybe this is also something we can talk about. So maybe I will start by asking over there our friend Norman to introduce himself quickly.
Yes, I'll do so. Hello, my name's Norman. Thank you for that one. My name's Norman. I'm coming from the financial services industry. I've actually studied in Germany and France at the time, and then worked for a long time in consulting before then joining a bank where I served in the last 6 years as a chief data officer. And I also was joining Zenota for half a year and working with them, and among that also on topics of the musical industry. So I'm really grateful here to be today, and I'll hand over to the genius of Zenota, to Andrew Kessler.
Thank you. My name is Andrew Kessler. I'm the CTO for Zenota. We're a layer one technology that takes data seriously. We realize that data rights and data management are two separate things, but they shouldn't be dealt with on two separate blockchains. We have two projects, playingfields.com, which is geared around bringing value networks to blockchain gaming, and Beatback, which is our music initiative, so that we can illustrate how best to build new digital assets and create value around data.
And we go on over here.
My name is David May. I'm a music producer since, 25, 30 years, growing up in a actually star family, growing in Poland, moving to Germany and producing with stars like Bruno Mars, Flo Rida, Snoop Dogg, based in Switzerland. And I'm very happy to talk about music business and being invited here to talk about the solutions.
Very good.
Thank you. My name is Paul Garibaldi. Just for the record, I still want to be a rock star. I'm not I'm not giving up my dream. It's not going to happen. Just a little note. I'm employed by Google Cloud. I'm an executive in that organization. I am not with YouTube. A little bit of a typo there, so don't ask me any questions about YouTube, but I encourage you to watch YouTube. I spend a lot of my time focused on data, which is a very strong suit of Google Cloud. I also spend a lot of my time working with some of the largest enterprises all across Europe, a little bit in the United States, but mostly Europe, talking to them about digital transformation and how they should go about it. Crypto eventually gets into every single conversation, and I hope I have some good comments, some insightful comments on that topic. And thank you for having me, Raylo. Thank you so much.
When I said it's a great audience, that was true. And when I say it's a great panel, I think that is as well true. So let's see what we can get out of you guys. So I was talking about streaming previously, right? And the idea is, first of all, the distribution stream obviously has been unlocked for releasing all the music basically that was out there that previously, when you had to go into a record store and go through those records, was not available, right? So there was the long tail that was unleashed. But what does it mean for the various players and ultimately to the artists creating the music? So I'm looking around myself. Who would like to start?
I'll have a first go at that. You know, music is a very unique vertical. And so, you know, when you're getting into the NFT space, if anyone's interested in getting into NFTs or owning digital content or digital assets, don't ever believe that an NFT is an NFT is an NFT. How game items behave is completely different to how music behaves, which is fundamentally different to how art behaves. And so understanding the kind of the vertical specifics or the market specifics give you insights into where are the challenges and what is possible and what isn't possible. And firstly, the sad reality is that everyone's got a microphone in their pockets on their cell phone. And so the ability to duplicate some music is now trivial. It's completely trivial. And you will never, ever, ever stop piracy. This is something that I think content producers have struggled with because their content is their right to generate revenue. And so what they're essentially doing, if you go to a movie and you buy a movie ticket, it's priced the same. Whether it's a great movie or a terrible movie, you're in for that price point, right? And so we've kind of taken this commoditized approach to a song is a song is a song. It's all $1 a song, right? Whether it's a great song that took years to create at the painstaking labor of the artist, or if it was churned out in 30 seconds from some auto song generator. And that's really terrible. So the economics doesn't match the industry. That's kind of the first thing. And the fact that we have rampant access to piracy is just also terrible for the artist. You want to know why the pop charts are flooded with derivatives? It's because no one's funding innovation and experimentation. There's no money there. So why would anyone do it, right? So piracy is a thing that's taking real value away from all of us, right? The flip side to that is traditionally, if you were buying sort of CDs, if you're that old, I certainly am. I would often look at a song and say, I would love to buy the CD. I just don't have the money for it. It's priced beyond me. So if you can find a way to reach a more global market, if you can tackle the issues around privacy and you can find different ways to monetize and revenue streams and give it back to the content creator, that kind of fixes everything in one fell swoop. And that's the promise of blockchain, but that's not the reality of blockchain. And so a lot of what we're seeing is that producers used to extract a bulk of their money from the artist using traditional means, and now they extract a bulk of the value using blockchain means. And that's not what it's about. So what I'd really like to see for the industry is for us to understand what does the technology enable and what are better models.
And you didn't answer my question whether the streaming actually has led to more or less people doing that, but let's give it a...
Just to end on that, streaming has led to sort of great accessibility, but because of rampant piracy and a lack of being able to control and monetize it in a way that suits the artist, it's degraded the quality of the music. So we have more accessibility, but what we're hearing over the radio is more terrible.
We'll comment on that one.
Yeah, just to extend on that, I mean, there are a few other things you may want to talk about when mentioning streaming. So one of the things there is you don't own anymore, right? So you pay, you subscribe to a service, or you have to listen to some commercials in order to listen to music, but you don't own it anymore. Does that make a difference? Well, it may be, especially if we look at revenues. Right, so in the old days, and you can correct me there if I'm wrong, David, there was something between 12 to 16% of the revenues landing with the artists somehow, and the rest got eaten by publishers, by songwriters, by the records companies, and so on. Now the situation, I think, is actually worse. Right? I just made a quick. So we're a bit more than 50 people in here in the room, and just to make that now, if you would all have the same favorite artist, just as an assumption, ceteris paribus, and you would listen to a song of him. Now, all of you would have to listen 200 times for that person then to make $40. Yeah? So have fun now. 3 minutes 50 average song duration. You can sit here for quite a while before your favorite artist earns $40. And in the good old days of sales of CDs, that was still different, right? The revenues were a little bit easier for the artist to reach. And nowadays, actually, and then the pandemic even made it worse, because the only alternate income stream that they would have is the gigs, going out, making concerts, and the merchandise. And during the pandemic, that wasn't even happening, and all they had was the stream. So coming back to that point, it has gotten worse. And from my point as a data manager, it's really worse in the sense, you mentioned piracy, right? Piracy was already bad. Is streaming so much better for the guys? I mean, of course, they still get some money, but I think both parties are not well served with streaming. The artists, because they don't get a lot of money, and the consumers, because they don't own anything. And I think ownership, especially if it comes to certain pieces of art, and music can be a piece of art as well, is also of benefit. So just my 5 cents on that topic.
Thank you so much. Well, I would even put it a bit more cunningly, because a friend of mine who's a very famous music guy said in the old days he used to tour to sell records, right? And now he's doing records so he can go on tour and sell T-shirts. So that's what he's turned into. This is where the money is right now, because there's no money in the music as such. So that is the question: how much do they get, and could blockchain change it a little bit? Maybe your view.
I do have a view, and maybe 10 cents instead of 5 cents, because I like to hear myself talk. I think there's an incredible convergence right now happening in the industry in a couple of ways, and I think a lot of it actually has been brought around by the COVID event that happened 2 years ago that we all lived through. The convergence that I see is happening in the music industry simultaneously with a lot of cornerstones that are happening in the crypto world, combined with a lot of the challenges that are being faced in the music industry. But the challenges that I'll describe are not just in music, these are happening in other industries. And what's happening is, when you look at the older models of business, as my colleagues commented, a lot of what's happened is those models now are being decomposed, right? Those older systems are being innovated, right? There's new systems being generated. So what's happening, and I think a lot of it happened because of COVID. Because of COVID, what happened now is a lot of the consumers, they had to consume the music in different ways. So here's an example. They wanted live events, right? They wanted streaming live events, as an example. But they also wanted to consume in a way that they wanted to consume it, not that the way that the music industry wanted it to deliver it to them. So this opened up a lot of different things. So those companies that were enabled to those changes early on actually did extremely well, right? So if you take retail as an example, it's a little off music, but some of the retailers had incredible revenue growths because they were enabled to do it. Others failed, right? We had some big retailers in my home country, United States, that name brand retailers like Neiman Marcus and JCPenney that went bankrupt. If I look at the music industry and I look at what's happening in crypto, in the music industry, there are a lot of, it's a very complex distribution model. You have digital rights, you have the consumer, you have the payments, right? I mean, just in payments alone, it's very complex. You have producers, you have record labels, you have the musicians. In the United States, you actually even have to pay the songwriter, and it gets even more complex than that. Each underlying has a contract, right? So when I think about, the convergence of the two technologies, the music and what's happening in music and the evolution of it, I think spurred by COVID, combined with what's happening in crypto. I mean, I got a really kick out of it. My mom called me up about a few months ago, and she bought a Bitcoin, which I told her to make sure was in my inheritance. But you see this in actual change. And if you think about how that all happens, underlying it, in my opinion, is the APIs, right? So I had a fascinating discussion with Andrew last night, and the discussion was, if you're decomposing these systems and these models are changing, how are you going to connect them all? And I think APIs, I mean, if you look at the companies that have succeeded in this arena, they've done it with APIs. So the API essentially becomes a key component of this type of digital transformation. And if you look at the API, for an API, the blockchain and the crypto is just another back end. I mean, that's all it is, right? So you can communicate with it across all this massive new ecosystem that's being developed. And as that ecosystem evolves, right, because it's always evolving, you need to have a way to connect it all, right? So I think because I'm at a Zanata event, I'll make a comment on Zanata, and I'll quickly stop talking because I'm sure everybody's bored. Yeah, I'm 15 cents, but I'm still going, don't worry. Because I'm at a Zanata event, what fascinated me about the Zanata technology was the ability for a musician, for example, to monetize very effectively and maintain digital rights. And in that distribution channel, they had a way to essentially democratize that whole process. So I think there's a big future ahead for Zanata, and that's my 17.5 cents, and I'll stop there.
Well, thanks for that. I mean, but still, to come back to my very first question, which is, again, to make it very grabbable, if you like. I, like 2 months ago, got a letter saying that I got $2 whatever because one of the songs I was a writer of was played in Brazil, right? And that was 6 years ago. Right, so that is kind of the problem I'm seeing. So maybe how do you see that? Because obviously you mentioned some of the big names out there. You've been working with them. Do you see their income going down with all of the streaming and with all of this change and moving the musical industry into the digital world, but without the payment and all the systems behind it?
Correct. First of all, I would like to say that every person who mentioned and described, their position is right. We had differences. I'm coming from 90s, where we have been producing CDs, selling CDs, and earning a lot of money. Really, there was a CD called Bravo Hits, maybe people know it from Central of Europe. If you had one track on this mix CD, I could buy a house, right? So it was quite a lot of money, right? It was just one CD, one track, it was sold. Then we have been going through the digitalization, piracy. It was huge problems. And actually this whole system fell down because nobody was willing to buy CDs anymore. And we as a producers, content creators, all the creative people, we didn't have any income. It was gone. So, and then all the tech companies like Google, Apple, etc., tried to solve this problem, providing us the solution of digital distribution, right? And yes, it is less per click or per one-time streaming. But in total accumulation of, if you accumulate the whole industry itself, we are growing since 5 years, 10 to 20% per year. So you have to imagine that there's a huge possibility for us to grow. For each artist itself, it's difficult. What we are facing now is the problem of, which Paul mentioned, is the problem of how all the rights which we are creating the music, how they are splitted in regulations which we trust. And that's what blockchain is for, I think.
I'd just like to build on that point for a moment. A good way to think about this is trying to figure out where the point of sale is for a particular song, right? So I don't think that existing blockchain technology is a magic fix for everything in the music industry. It certainly is going to help in its current format musicians to get paid in minutes rather than years. And that's going to be great for the musician. But you really want to get the buy-in of the consumer as well. And so if you have a technology where I can send you a perfected NFT type of technology, like the ones we've developed at Sonata, where you can send out a file in exchange for payment, what it means is that the point of sale isn't at a concert, a point of sale isn't with a third party at a central organization. You're not just distributing payments, you're distributing distribution, right? So on my computer, when I get the MP3, the artist gets their money at the same time. And that benefits me as the consumer. But you also have to enable blockchains to be able to handle streaming. Streaming isn't something that's natively supported by blockchains. Blockchains work predominantly with hash-based technology, which is a fingerprint. But you know how it is with YouTube. If the internet connectivity drops, it resamples at a lower rate just to keep streaming, right? And so with sort of usage and bandwidth, if you're dropping resolution of a song or ramping it up depending on internet connectivity, no hash will authenticate, even if you are getting the correct song. So we need to be more broad-based in how technology enables this. If I, as a consumer, can change what I pay for a song, imagine a world, this is a cool thought experiment which could be feasible on blockchain. What if I, as a DJ, could pay for a song per beat? I'm at a live event, I'm reading the crowd, I want to give the blockchain content producer some revenue. 30 seconds into a song, the crowd just isn't feeling it and I want to change track. I don't want to have to pay for the whole song and then only use the first 30 seconds of it for that event. And so if you can marry distributing the asset in exchange for the payment, and you can do that point of sale event live in real time at an event, in a music store, through a streaming service, that's when we're going to see the music industry change through blockchain technology.
Well, the question is, who is the music industry, right? I think the first thing you touch upon is, let's do a little quota here. Who of you has bought a song and streamed it? Who has bought an entire record album and streamed it? Right, it's not that many, right? So I think in the old days, I mean, I am still collecting vinyl records, don't go there, but anyway, but that's how I grew up, right? You had the entire thing. If I look at my son now at 12 years old, he's going for the hit songs, right? And you were saying they're not even going for the hit songs, they're going for 30 seconds of it, 10 seconds of it, 20 seconds, and so forth. And the real question with all of that is who is benefiting from that? So who is getting the real lion's share? Well, I mean, right now, I obviously have not only a feeling, we've done a study on that, but I'm going to get onto this after I've asked you. But what is your question of who is getting how much of the current music business being put to market in that way, where people are going more after one song on streaming kind of, providers?
I think the current trend in music is to realize that music doesn't make you money. Music is a chance for you to get famous, and being famous makes you money. So that's kind of the model that people are trying to work off of. There are many new artists who don't even dream of seeing revenue on their first 100 or 200 songs. They just want to get more fame. And then they want to capitalize that to do better deals to get more money. So currently, it's really quite an abusive relationship with studios and producers and everyone in the music industry per se, taking in excess of 90% of the revenue, and the actual content creator is getting next to nothing.
Just to extend a little bit on that one, I read a really interesting interview article with Aloe Black, and I Need $1, you remember that guy, right? That was probably also around Spotify, I don't know. But at that point in time, he said the interaction with the consumer, with the fan, with the supporter, that is something that he's looking for, true interaction. And of course, also revenues. I mean, he was really pretty clear about that. He said the charm of the blockchain technology is that you also have recurring revenues because you get royalties, like, you know, on a recurring basis, and there are no more middlemen around that. And if he needs to share something, he writes his own songs, but still there will be a producer. So, but it's up to him and this entire team then to agree on how they share this revenue set. And it's not that given structure anymore, where you're at the end of the food chain, and you just have to live what comes up. So the blockchain technology and the music NFTs give them actually two things. It's the revenue thing, and then the other side, creating special experiences with their fans, with their supporting base. And that's just another viewpoint. I don't think we contradict, but it's just another viewpoint from artists who are already a bit more established than maybe so many newcomers. But that's really a great chance here.
I agree. I think that's where we can then take it to. Yes.
I mean, I have also some friends doing music, mostly in the electronic music field, and what I see with them is, I mean, some of them they have now through streaming. Of course, they don't get much per song, but their advantage is they're not at all geographically bound. Huh? They're a musician in Zurich, but their music is played in LA in a coffee. And I think this is a huge advantage. I mean, this can be really like, you have this wave momentum. Once you get big, it can really become a big thing. And I think this is also something we've taken into account. Before, I mean, the CDs you mentioned probably was geographically quite
GSA.
clear who listened to this. And this is not clear anymore.
Well, the real question is of whether the cafe in LA actually pays for playing that song, right? Which in the old ways was more clearer. But I think that's what we want to dive into because, well, I'm going to ask the two of you and then I'm going to give you the numbers,
Sorry,
right?
so just to add a comment there, that is really going to enable a lot of music is not being bound to a geographical location. One of the complexities that come up there is that different jurisdictions have different laws on what qualifies revenue and how much and all the rest of it. So what I really want to encourage people in the blockchain space to start thinking about is incorporating jurisdictional supports into the blockchain protocol.
I don't have a comment.
No, you definitely have a comment, right?
Well, I see it from very many perspectives. On one hand, I'm producing music. I love music. I'm a passionate producer and componist, right? On the other side, I'm running as well a business, so I'm licensing music, reselling it to different territories. I think that streaming is actually as well a great opportunity to show and present music to a bigger audience, point one. Point two, through those channels which are very much competitive to radio stations, I have another income streams. It is maybe less per one-time listening, right? But the audience I'm reaching out to using additional tools of advertising is giving me way more possibilities to grow, right? And I think there was never a chance before like today to do that. But what we need is we need really regulations that actually all the payments are arriving to us, right? And this is where I see the chance in blockchain in general. And you are right. I'm receiving as well, sometimes from Brazil or from US, you know, a song, if my shares or my composition is played in the US today, I will receive this payment maybe 4 years later. And this is something that needs to be changed.
Yes. I mean, this is what I was trying to get to, right? We have an industry that has become digital, right, as all of us would agree, but the very industry around it hasn't, right? So you have classical way of auditing it and but it's still very much undigital. So this is, I think, where the real big opportunity of blockchain lies, right? That once you manage to overstep that and then you transfer everything by different ways of doing that onto the blockchain, that you could speed up getting the money. And then you could also think about who gets how much of that money, right? Again, I don't want to go up against the record companies and so forth. They've done a great job in the past 100 years, but still, the percentage they're getting today is just amazing, right? And they are mostly doing accounting and legal these days and filing things from left to right rather than being out there, finding the new bands, the new artists, getting them into the record studio, getting them on tour, getting them out and so forth. Obviously understood with COVID, getting them on tour was not the biggest and the easiest thing to do, but nevertheless, that is what they were meant to do and what they are not doing so much today. Again, no criticism, but if they can't do it, then the question is, do we actually need them to do that in a blockchain world? Can't we overstep that, right? So the real question is then, blockchain is always touted as this idea that basically solves all the problems out there in the world, right? And that will make everything better. But how do we do that, right? You started to talk about the things you're doing at Zenota. Maybe you want to talk a bit more about that, and then the others are obviously more than invited to offer their view.
Yes, so the unique challenge around music, if you compare it to art or games, is that music to a large extent is not procedurally generated, right? So art can be procedurally generated. You can make a very small phrase, because remember, blockchain entry is only going to accept about 500 bytes, maybe 1,000 bytes if you're on a more modern blockchain. And that's just not enough space to kind of post music or do something, intelligent with. So, we've seen a lot of uptake and penetration in the gaming market and the art market, but the music art market is kind of lagging behind, to be honest. So there we really have to start realizing that some blockchains are built to handle data and others really aren't, and to sort of get the music industry in front of the guys that are dealing with data. And the second one is the legal issues and the regulatory and compliance issues around music is horrendously complicated. If you look at game studios and they produce an asset, it's very clear cut, when something is transferred. And an artist doesn't sell you the rights to the music the way a game producer sells you rights to an item. You can go and do whatever you want with that item, modify it, that's fine, but you can't really do that with music. There's master copy, there's copyright, there's a range of things that have to be managed. And what computers literally exist to do is to automate complex tasks. They do nothing else, right? And so what blockchain adds is doing complicated tasks in a compliant, efficient, and economic and legal framework. And so really, if applied correctly, that is going to be the third arm. And then I think the fourth point to bear in mind is we can look at things differently on a blockchain. So what does it mean to have access to a song? Because I don't own a song, right? But having access to listening to a song. It can be a way for an artist to engage their fan base. Because a dual double entry blockchain ledger that can keep track of who's bought what in an anonymous, privacy-preserving way means I can reward my fans. I can say to my most loyal fans, on my next up-and-coming concert, whenever that might be, if you own a blockchain streaming service to my music or a blockchain song, I'll give you 20% discount on the ticketing. And so having rights to something doesn't matter if that's all it gives me. But if those rights are transferable or they give me access to other things, other services, other values, other experiences, then I don't want the pirated copy, right? And that's where you have to start shifting the way you think about the asset, right? I only want the pirated copy because I get all the utility from the pirated copy that I do from the original. But in the blockchain space, we can break that. We can say, well, if you've bought the blockchained music, you also get discounted rates, you get better fan treatment, you get engagement, you get visibility, you get better experiences. And that makes owning the original attractive because it does something for the consumer. And so once again, blockchain is really about building that out.
Yeah, just hit the nail on the spot there. It's I started before about ownership. And I think ownership is really, really important here. I mean, it's not only for the user, for the consumer, for the supporter that he owns the song, and also for the producer and the artist. There's so much more that you can do with ownership. And at the moment, ownership in the digital world is broken. It doesn't work, right? We can copy, there's piracy. You can't reap the benefits of ownership. But if there's a possibility in the digital world that you can reap this ownership, like, for example, with the solutions that Zenota produce, you can bring all the benefits of ownership with that. And as you said, it's not only royalties, it's special offers, it's participation, it's community effects, all that with a solution on the blockchain. And that is, I think, the big jump, the big development, which is actually really possible, because it's all about property rights. And let me tell you, I mean, there are companies like Kohlberg, Kravis, and Roberts, which maybe some of you know, just to give a financial services perspective here, who are investing heavily into record labels and catalogs of music business, right? There's big money in there. Now, of course, that's only from their side because they want to live from the royalties. But again, it's a property rights thing. So if you can assure property rights on the blockchain properly, and you can do atomic transactions, meaning I give you something, which is a digital asset of music file, and you give me money for it, crypto money. And if you can ensure that, you're already way ahead of what happens today. Because again, streaming is not owning. Streaming is leasing, is renting. You can't do all these nice little benefits that you can do maybe on the blockchain. So we can think ahead into the metaverse. Artists which can have, let's call it virtual concerts or specials in their own virtual home in the metaverse. All that is possible then once you have made that property rights really working in the digital world. And that is what blockchain offers here. And I think this is really where we can leapfrog in the industry.
And the value becomes accretive, because if I'm playing a video game and there's some streaming service or blockchain music that I can own, I can now enjoy that soundtrack while playing this game. And so once we kind of have a standard data structure, a standard accounts of ledgers, we can start looking at how one closely related industry benefits from another closely related industry. Sorry, do you have a question?
I have a question. I mean, I'm old enough to have pirated music on cassettes. I owned vinyl, I owned CDs. I got rid of it. I'm very happy. I don't want to own music anymore. So I hear from you that you think that consumers want to re-own songs. I don't think so. I look at my daughter, she will never, ever have something like that. So how would you then convince consumers to go back? I don't know.
Yeah, so that's I think, a general trend that we've seen across generational lines, is this notion of like, why do I have to own anything, you know? The ownership isn't the issue. The issue is what benefits do I get from having something? And so let's say I want to get having access to a song and being a fan and loyally supporting a community. Shouldn't I get at least the first announcement of an upcoming tour or concert, right? And what do we use as a signal? I'm the artist. I want to engage with my fan base. How? So I'm an artist, so if there was a public ledger of accounts that I could scroll through and say, the owner of address 11783, the owner, I mean, if the young generation don't care about ownership, they do care about benefits and rights and services and getting more value. And so ownership is just the hidden, buried mechanic that we're trading on the ledger, so that the transfer of value is more apparent. What value do I get for consuming something? And the music industry is heavily driven on consumption.
But they do this through social media already. They communicate with their fan base through TikTok, through Facebook, even OnlyFans.
Yes.
So there is the direct communication.
You can solve any problem on a blockchain with a conventional system. Why do I pay in Bitcoin? I mean, I can just pay you with a banking dollar. I mean, we have dollars, right? Why do I need to identify myself on a blockchain? Because I've got an ID card and the government knows who I am. So the central question there is, there are many ways to skin a cat. There's many ways to get the job done. How do I then think about choosing the blockchain as a tool versus any other tool? And blockchains done right give machine executability, scale, speed, and lack of error. And so what you don't get from traditional mechanics, so artists just can't get out there at scale to engage with their consumer base if they're motivated and they have time, and a social media platform doesn't give them if you're a shy person, if you're a more private person, doesn't mean you're any less of a diehard fan. And there is an alarming trend by which the way that I get utility from non-blockchain systems is by sacrificing my privacy, by committing to. Yeah, so it's a question of how do we do things efficiently at scale, and for cost against risk, and balance privacy and all of these complex social issues. And it turns out, who knew it back in 2009, but blockchain give us that balance between those things.
What's your view on that?
I think that younger people, I think a lot of younger folks have a concept that they can stream and they can pay a subscription price and get whatever music that they want. However, if that music is not available on a streaming service, then they only have one place to get it, and that is they have to go directly to the artist. A place to store that, right? Because if it's not available on streaming, it's not available. I mean, it's really that simple. So if they want to, so you do see a lot of artists now that are moving off streaming because of the low payout, or the lower pay, what they perceive as lower payouts. Now, if they want the distribution, they're going to go to streaming because that's where they're going to get it. I think the divergence I was talking about earlier is in that area where the blockchain provides the ability for the artists and the consumers to connect in a common place where there could be ownership of what my generation would basically buy, a record or a CD, right? So I'm not sure how this is all going to shake out, but I see this as kind of a movement in the industry right now, right? There's the streaming services which are doing really great. I mean, the Spotifys of the world, you know, they provide an excellent service. They do it on a subscription price, but then you also see a lot of artists moving away from that, right? So you kind of see both happening. And you also see the complexity of the distribution of all of that, right? You know, how do all these people in that ecosystem get paid? And how's it all tracked? And how does it affect the consumer? Right, so what I always think about is, what some of my colleagues mentioned is, there's that experience component, right? You know, they want to have a great experience, but they want that experience the way they want to have it, whether it be on their mobile phone or if they want to stream it at home, right? Or they want to own the piece of the music, right? I mean, there's all these different variables that are going on. It gets really, really complex. I mean, what I like about some of the things that Zanata is proposing is they're actually talking about tackling these very complex issues, like digital rights, for example, right? And tackling the issue of how the payment of the money goes between all the different constituents in this big ecosystem that exists out there. So it's pretty I will grant you, it's pretty complex. It's a very interesting question. I'm not sure where it's going to go, but what I do see is there's a lot of movement going on right now. There's a lot. I'll add one last comment, is that in all of that, there's this element of trust, right? Is whether you're the musician or whether you're the consumer or whether you're a record label or wherever you may be in that ecosystem, how do you build in trust into all that, right? For example, on the digital rights, how do you build it in, right? Because you see a lot of movement out there. You see copying, you see piracy, you see all this kind of stuff going on. One of the nice things, and I'm sorry if I sound like a Zanata sales rep, but one of the nice things I hear Zanata proposing is they're proposing to tackle these types of problems, right? Where that so they talk about this concept of a dual double entry bookkeeping, right? And I'm an old accounting major from back in the day, and if a company transacts, typically what they're doing is that transaction is only tracked in two places. The double entries happens with company A. They track that transaction internally, and then the company they're transacting with, company B, tracks it. There's double entry on both sides, but there is not continuity or consistency between the two. Therefore, there's always an issue of trust. If you kind of think of Zanata, that trust issue essentially could be handled, right? Especially if you're transferring. What are you transferring? You're transferring digital rights. You're transferring a piece of data. You're transferring a piece of music, a video, an album. I mean, whatever it might be, right? How do you ensure the immutability, right, or the insurance that it can't be changed, right, that transaction can't be changed and be tracked in a trustworthy environment, right, in a trustworthy infrastructure. So that's probably way too long of an answer, Gunther, but.
We're actually out of time, but maybe one last question from Nico, who asked first.
Actually, very good comments from everybody. I just think I have to look at it a little bit differently. There are two types of economy. There's the shared economy and there's the ownership investment economy. And now let's look at it at a different angle. That the songs and why people are not buying them because there's no added value and there can be as a utility added additional value to it. Now, should we assume that the song becomes an NFT and that NFT is fractionalized? And that fractionalized NFT can be owned and has some sort of security elements to it, which will allow for the valuation increase and also for royalties to be distributed to all the owners thanks to Venato and thanks to the blockchain technology. Would then that be a solution and that encouragement for the millennials and Generation Y to really start investing in buying songs and not just the utility of them, but actually as an investment opportunity?
Yes.
Yeah, of course, yes.
Last answer.
I think what we are facing now is awareness and awareness about what actually copyright's value is. First of all, there are, like Norman said, there are people investing, and they are not only investing based on royalties, they are now investing as well because actually music is responsible for data transfer. Huge amount of data which are shifted from A to B, and that means network connectivity point. And this value is missed by the music industry. So many people who have understanding why we are using music industry. We need that 24/7 everywhere, and we want to participate in that. And therefore, we need solutions, as Venato is one of those. We need a solution how our rights will be paid in a fair way.
That is a perfect ending because we have overstepped the time. I have 8 more questions here, but I will take them into the break. Thank you a million for sharing the stage here. I think you provided a lot of value. I hope you all agree. And let's give a big one up to this panel, huh?